Hi, I'm Kylie, and I make fresh, delicious Papa Murphy's pizza.
Hi, I'm Zach, and I make the Papa Murphy's pizza.
Sure, that's take and bake. We built it with the freshest ingredients. You bake it fresh in your oven.
By you mean me, so technically, I make the pizza.
Super good pizza, Kylie.
Oh, Kylie, so good.
At Papa Murphy's, we make great pizza, so you can make the pizza great.
Oh yeah, I make the pizza great.
Papa Murphy's, change the way you pizza.
This is a Queen Bee Radio High School sports presentation.
Welcome to another edition of the Papa Murphy's of Platteville and Prairie Chien High School Football Roundup on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. We are down to the final rounds of the high school football postseason in Wisconsin. We also have the Galena Pirates in Illinois who come off a nice win over the weekend. We'll talk about the Galena Pirates in a little bit as well. Joined by Matthew Goninen and our Galena truther, Steve Prestegard, on today's show. And also a reminder to check out the Papa Murphy's Cheesy Stuffed Crust Pizza. It's the hottest, meltiest, best stuffed crust pizza you've ever had. Try a large one-topping pizza for just $13.99 at Papa Murphy's of Platteville and Prairie du Chien. We began the show last week talking about the Highland Cardinals and getting into the 8-player football state semifinal round. They went to Stanley Boyd, making the 3+ hour trip to take on Owen Withee, and the Highland Cardinals' path to state ended there. They lost to Owen Withee 23-21, a game that we had on Extreme 107.1 last week. Steve, you made the road trip up there as well with Gary Craw to call that matchup, and a heartbreaking way for the Highland Cardinals season to end. They had a very great run throughout the postseason, and it was number 1 versus number 2 in the state if you looked at rankings, and it seemed like the scoreboard certainly lived up to the hype. Take us through the matchup and how Highland's season ended with a very tough 2-point loss.
You know, you wouldn't know it based on the score because the score is not, exactly a shootout, but it was really a case where the other team one team could not stop the other. And particularly what ended up costing Highland is that Owen Withee's offensive running the ball could not be stopped. They tried everything, I guess, and Owen Withee ran kind of a 8-player version of the wing team, and they just literally couldn't stop them. In fact, this probably sounds like a previous playoff game, but Owen Withee, after an incomplete pass with 10:13 left in the game, Owen Withee never gave up the ball after that, and even though they did not score, they didn't give Highland another chance. And that was fortunate for Owen Withee because Owen Withee couldn't stop Highland's passing. Bennett Smith was, I didn't see any stats of this, but it seemed like he couldn't miss unless it was just a, badly thrown ball or something like that. He had all kinds of time to pass, and he was finding a variety of receivers and so on. What ended up stopping them was 1 interception and that incomplete pass with 10:13 left. And 2 running backs for Owen Withee just ground up Highland for about 300 total yards of rushing. And the big thing is Highland's defense just couldn't get it stopped. And that's what ended the Cardinal season, which was just a tremendous season, obviously. When you get to the game before state undefeated, you've had a great year. The unfortunate thing is that's the one game, as you know, that you absolutely hate to lose the most of all. And I guess we might be talking about that a little bit also. But that was basically what it is. It was a great ball game. Highland had a 14-0 lead. But unfortunately, Owen Withee, just from about the mid-second quarter on, literally their rush offense could not be stopped.
Yeah, again, a very heartbreaking way for the Highland Cardinals season to end in their first season as an 8-player football team. And we talked about how successful, the team was throughout the season. They just seemed so much more physically imposing compared to the teams in the Ridge and Valley 8-player conference, and, seemed to kind of get by, especially in their first 2 rounds of the postseason, relatively unscathed. But when you run into the number 1 ranked team in the state in 8-player football, and You lose by 2. It's always coming down to, if the ball bounced your way on one play, or, if one possession had ended differently, things like that. A tough way for the Highland Cardinals to end their season up in Stanley. Boyd Owen Withy advances to the state championship game in 8-player football coming up on Saturday. The Highland Cardinals finish with just 1 loss on their record, and that comes in the state semifinal round in 8-player football. Let's move into the Division 7 matchup that we had on Super Hits 106 and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. A Big Six Rivers rivalry game renewed for an opportunity to advance to the state semifinal. And Potosi Cassville grinds out a 21-14 win over the River Ridge Timberwolves. Matthew, you were producing our video stream on our Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel, and this probably lived up to the hype as far as how emotional the game was, how much both teams wanted to get the win and advance. A year ago, Potosi Cassville season ended in this round of the postseason when Blackhawk Warren shut them out 35-0, but they take care of River Ridge in a second matchup this year. Take us through it, Matthew. What stood out to you about the game?
I think the best way to sum it up is that Coach Siegert of Potosi Cassville in the post-game interview said he could not be happier to not have to play any more Six Rivers teams this season, which is understandable. The Six Rivers, very, very, very good football conference. He's had to play River Ridge and Blackhawk Warren twice, and they came out unscathed this year. So that's the thing about Potosi Cassville. And some of the things I noticed in that game, River Ridge actually led in that game. They were up 14-13 with just 8 minutes left in that game. But the thing that was really the big problem for River Ridge is how much they turned the football over. They had 2 early interceptions and then a third interception thrown by the punter trying to get away from the Potosi Cassville defense, and they lost 2 fumbles. Now, Potosi Cassville was able to control the run game, and River Ridge was a little more successful in the passing game, with Sportsnet showing that Potosi Cassville only threw the ball twice, so they do have the option of whether or not they want to go look to that pass game and whether they want to lean on Dawson Weber or whether they want to go towards more of the run game. And it was the run game and Isaiah Groom that led them to being able to control that game, especially towards the end, regain the lead, and then hold off River Ridge to pick up the win 21-14.
Yep. Turning a River Ridge team over 5 times certainly, helps your cause. And again, that Potosi Cassville defense has been, stout all season long, especially the run defense. We've seen instances where teams were held to either no yards or negative yardage there. And, again, a very tough task against River Ridge, and they answered the call and, got that late score to pull away and hold River Ridge out. And Potosi Cassville advances to the state semifinal round for the first time as a co-op, and they will take on Kenosha St. Joseph. We'll have that game on 97.7 Country WGLR and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. I'll start with you, Steve. What are you looking forward to most about this matchup for Potosi Cassville to try and punch their ticket to state?
Well, one thing that's going to be interesting is what's going to give, because Kenosha St. Joseph hasn't given up a point in the postseason, believe it or not. They are, however, not a ranked team, which is kind of interesting. Remember, last year they were a Division 6 team. Lancaster had to go all the way over to Kenosha, but came back with the win in Level 2. Most of that team came back. So there's that part. They tend to play in a conference that's got larger teams in it, like Racine St. Catharines, which is still in the playoffs. I think, however, one important thing to keep in mind is that thanks to I'll call it goofy, and that might be the most printable thing I can say about the seeding this year, Potosi Cassville had a pretty rough road to get to this point. Not only did they play 2 teams through their conference twice, the second time in the postseason, but every opponent that they've had to this point was a ranked team. Blackhawk Warren was ranked 3rd. Cochran Fountain City, which was legitimately the number 2 seed, even if you'd done the seeding correctly, they were ranked 9th, and River Ridge was ranked 10th, and arguably could have been a better team than that. So Potosi Cassville's had a much more difficult path, I think, than Kenosha St. Joseph. They've got a lot of gaudy offensive stats, and they also have, obviously, the 3 shutouts in the postseason. But the question that comes to mind, I think, is what kind of competition were those three teams that St. Joseph played? One of them was another team in their conference. Gee, where have you seen that before? So, this is going to be a really interesting situation with the number one team in Division 7 against a team that is not ranked and is, dare I say it, for a parochial school, maybe the Cinderella in the Division 7 postseason.
Very interesting. And Matthew, again, you saw Potosi Castle last week, getting off that, very emotional win against another, Six Rivers opponent. This is the second year in a row that Potosi Castle has had to play two Six Rivers opponents during the postseason. But getting to this stage of the postseason, obviously the vibes are positive in the Potosi Castle locker room and community. What do you make of the matchup heading up against Kenosha St. Joseph on Friday night?
Yeah, going into level 4, one round away from state, and such a good football program in Potosi Cassville, and really just a bunch of schools here that are such good at athletics all around. So the fans are really going to bring it. And one thing I've got to say after this year of doing football is Potosi is one of my favorite places to do a game. I got to go there twice, and it's an incredible fan base. And speaking about the game in specific, one thing that Steve talked about is the stats and the numbers that you see from the Kenosha St. Joseph offense, and they're pretty incredible. Zach Rizzo, their quarterback, has thrown 26 passing touchdowns this season on almost 1,700 yards, and add on Chris Kniese, who has 15 touchdowns at running back with over 1,200 yards. So the thing that I kind of notice about both is they've kind of got really dynamic offenses, and I talked about this earlier with Potosi Cassville a little bit. Because they're strong up front, they can look to go to the run game or work on that pass protection and go to the pass game. They do have some talent in throwing the football and making some hard catches, those wide receivers. So it's going to be interesting to see how both of these teams view the opposing defense and how they choose to deal with that, and that'll kind of dictate the way the game flows.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that one plays out. Again, Friday night, we will have Potosi Cassville and Kenosha St. Joseph on 97.7 Country WGLR and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. Division 7 state semifinal. The winner goes to Camp Randall Stadium next Thursday. In Division 6, I got to call Lancaster and Belleville, or Belleville, one of the Cinderella teams of the postseason. An 8 seed continues their run, defeating Lancaster 35-32 in a wild football game. At Lancaster. Things got started real quickly with a 50-yard pass on the first play from scrimmage for Belleville that put the Wildcats in goal-to-go territory, and a couple plays later, Logan Durkee punched it in from 6 yards out to give Belleville a 7-0 lead. Belleville then turned Lancaster over on a 3-and-out, and then a double pass from Sam Arndt to Logan Durkee for a to make it 14-0, a 55-yard touchdown pass. So Belleville jumps out to a 14-0 lead about 5 minutes left in the first quarter, and then Nolan Hinkey got Lancaster on the board with a 2-yard touchdown run, made it 14-7. Then the ensuing kickoff, Mr. Nemec of Belleville, Cooper Nemec is the name, an 80-yard kickoff return for a touchdown to make it a 14-point ball game again, 21-7 the score there. And then Lancaster answered immediately with a touchdown run, Nolan Wolf punching it in from 5 yards out. Through the first quarter, it was 21-14 Belleville on top of Lancaster, and then the defenses started to settle in a little bit. Belleville did get another touchdown in the second quarter from Logan Durkee, and then Nolan Wolf punched it in from 33 yards out, and then Nolan Hinkey got a 2-yard touchdown. The 2-point conversion was no good. 28-26 was the halftime score. Lancaster would get the ensuing kickoff. They go on a touchdown drive to take the lead, 32-28, thanks to Nolan Hinkey's 1-yard touchdown run. But then it was Riker Swenson who got the final touchdown for Belleville to make it 35-32. That was a score midway through the third quarter, and both teams tried to kind of force their will and tried to go with the ground game to kind of put the game away. But for Lancaster, the series where the game really took a turn was about midway through the fourth quarter, about 7.5 minutes to go in the game. Nolan Hankey got the carry on a 4th and 6 and came just about half a yard shy of getting a first down that would have given them first and goal at the 3-yard line. But Belleville forcing the turnover on downs. Belleville was able to sit on the football for the final 7.5 minutes of the game, in large part to a big 3rd down play with about 2:50 to go in the game. It was 3rd and 7, and the quarterback, Brennan Keys, dropped back to pass. Trayson Fishnick deflects the pass that was a designed screenplay, but the running back, Logan Durkee, there to get the ball and then turn it upfield, carried 2 Lancaster defenders with him to get the ball across the first down marker, and Belleville was able to bleed out the clock from that point forward. But Belleville, again, the 8 seed, advances to the Division 6 state semifinal game. They take on Lamira coming up on Friday night, and Lancaster season falls to 8-4 on what has been a very injury-plagued year for the Flying Arrows, and Coach Jordan Rowland had to be really innovative as far as the offense goes, changing offenses essentially midway through the season to give his team the best opportunities to be successful. Stat-wise for the Flying Arrows, only 2 ball carriers, Nolan Wolf and Nolan Hankey, but they combined carried it for 54 times for 363 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. So that's how Lancaster's offensive production went. And Logan Durkee for Belleville, the key player for the Wildcats, 20 rushing attempts for 115 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and then 3 catches for 76 yards and 1 touchdown as well. So again, the Belleville Wildcats advance. Lancaster season ends in Division 6. And then our friends in Prairie du Chien. Prairie du Chien taking care of business against the Milwaukee Academy of Science 39-0. Prairie du Chien, 3 consecutive shutouts in postseason play, and a big outing again for Blake Thierry of Prairie du Chien. Blake Thierry, 23 rushing attempts for 169 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Also 3 catches for 64 yards and 1 touchdown. And Prairie du Chien takes on Stratford, the reigning Division 6 state champion. If you remember last year, Stratford defeated Darlington with a German foreign exchange student kicker that helped give them the 10-7 win, and the most bizarre ending to a football game that Steve and I were on the sideline for. That was one of the craziest scenes that I've ever seen to end a football game. But Prairie du Chien and Stratford in our Division 5 state semifinal game, we'll have that on our Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. And Steve, it's kind of hard to quantify just how dominant Prairie du Chien has been this year because, again, during the regular season, a running clock on every SWC opponent, and then shutouts through the first 3 rounds of the postseason. And this matchup with Stratford, perhaps the only other team that has as much momentum as Prairie du Chien, 24 consecutive wins when you go back to last year. I mean, this is a battle of heavyweights for an opportunity to go to state in Division 5.
Yeah, that's right. But my question about Stratford is, how many times have they seen a 6'5", 225-pound running back like Thierry is, who could also catch the football? I don't know if they grow them that big up north, and they usually don't down here either. But when you look at that team, there's a guy, nobody is truly unstoppable, but he's got to be pretty close to it. They have a pretty good fullback as well, and Bryce Linsendorf, their quarterback, is a good quarterback. And, it's a great matchup. It could be a state championship game matchup, even though it's early. Stratford's got the experience in the postseason, obviously winning the state title last year. I guess if I was Corey Koenig, I would be checking that roster to see if there are any foreign names on it for this year's kicker, possibly. But I don't know. Prairie du Chien, I don't know who's going to beat them because they are, they're playing outstanding on defense. When you have 3 shutouts in the postseason, that's that. And the great thing about having a running back like Thierry is that if you get any kind of lead, just hand it to him. And you don't have to fool anybody. Maybe give it to your fullback a couple of times. But that every time in a game that if you do nothing but run the football and you don't gain a single yard, you blow 2 minutes off the clock. And we obviously we've seen that. We've seen how Belleville was able to eat the clock at the end and beat Lancaster. We saw how Owen Withy was able to do that over Highland. Before that, we saw how Potosi Cassville was able to do that over Blackhawk Warren in the first round of the playoffs. Having Blake Terry as your running back and just being able to grind the clock out really shortens the game. It's like having a dominant relief pitcher in baseball. That you better get him before that. I would have to think also that it really changes your strategy really from the start, because that you want to get the lead as soon as you can and do what you can to take Prairie du Chien out of their offense, because if they're up 2 scores in the fourth quarter, I'm not sure you got a shot against them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I talked with Coach Koenig for our pregame interview, and I asked him, is there a team that's comparable to, who you've seen during the regular season that can help you prepare for a team like Stratford? And he said, quite honestly, it's like looking in the mirror. They play our style. So it's really hard to, kind of gauge, how you can kind of defend against yourself. And they kind of do it in different ways. The quarterback for Stratford, Jack Tubbs, he's a dual threat quarterback. And when you kind of look at the, rushing stats, very comparable to what Blake Terry is able to do. But of course, Tubbs is the dual threat, passing the football. He's got 25 passing touchdowns on the season and only 3 interceptions. So he takes care of the football quite well. So both teams have, key playmakers to kind of keep their teams in it and, avoid those key turnovers and mistakes. And it kind of seems like in this game, any mistake just gets amplified a little bit more. It's going to be about taking care of the football and doing the fundamental stuff right, I think, is how that game's going to be decided. And it should be one heck of a ball game from Wisconsin Dells. I'll have the call of that game with Brad Richardson again on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. Prairie du Chien taking on Stratford in the Division 5 state semifinal. Well, that covers it for the Wisconsin side of things. Let's talk about the IHSA side of it. And Steve, you got to see Galena defeat Ottawa Marquette 33-6 on Saturday on Super Hits 106, and now Galena takes on Leroy. I'll let you see if I got that one right, coming up on Saturday as well. First, talk about the matchup against Marquette and what you're looking for in the matchup on Saturday.
Well, Chuck Cordy and I both called them Leroy, so that's what we're sticking with until we're told otherwise. But Saturday's game was it's a good time for Galena to have the best game that they've had this year. The funny part about the ball game is that other than about an 80-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter, Galena didn't have a single long drive in the game. Their longest drive was like 50 yards. The reason was that that Marquette had 3 turnovers, and Galena scored on every one of those, scored off of every one of those turnovers. They had a great day from their running back, Miles Schumacher, 167 yards rushing. They had a very good day from their quarterback. He played well. The offensive line played well. And the defense held Marquette to under 100 yards in 3.5 quarters. They did finally score in the fourth quarter. That was against the freshmen and sophomores for Galena. So it was a great win. And now they move on to the quarterfinals for the first time in about 10 years, I believe. It's news. It's not bad news exactly, but they're going to have to play a team that is number 1 in the North bracket. The way it works in Illinois is that we've got in Wisconsin 4 8-team brackets. They have 2 16-team brackets, and Leroy, as it happens, is ranked number 1 in their bracket. They're undefeated. They didn't really have a single close game. They appeared to be a double wing team, I think, so they just basically grinded out. And they've got kind of a fun, and I can't pronounce his name yet because I have not done anything but email him just yet. But the father of the coach was the coach for Leroy, and the quarterback now for Leroy plays for his dad, who is now the coach. So it's kind of like 3 generations at the same high school. They also have one of their best defensive players who played for Leroy in the 2003 season. And I bring that up because Galena played Leroy at State in 2003, and Galena beat Leroy in double overtime because Galena's kicker made his extra point, and unfortunately, Leroy's kicker did not. So I don't know if anybody remembers that, but I bet somebody brings it up in the Leroy locker room or whatever. But they're going to have to play even better than they did. But you know, the analogy that we used was that Galena and Ottawa Marquette going into the game were playing with house money because they beat higher seeds. Well, Galena is now playing with house money after hitting the jackpot, basically, because they are, despite they were only 5-4 in the regular season, but they're one of the top 8 teams now in Class 1A because that's how far they've gotten in the state quarterfinals.
It should be an interesting matchup coming up on Saturday. We have Galena taking on Leroy on Super Hits 106. Raleigh Cheese pregame set for 12:40 and the kickoff at 1 o'clock. And that wraps up our recaps and previews for the remaining teams in our area for postseason football. Let's get to our team or teams of the week. And I've been kind of going back and forth with this, gentlemen. I think it's kind of hard to make the case against Potosi Cassville with the way that they were able to grind out a win against rival River Ridge. I have to admit the Cinderella of Belleville is, still a very outstanding, storyline, just given the start of their season and just being able to continue that momentum in Division 6. I'm stuck between the two. I can't pick one. I'm just going to go with those two. And then, of course, you can't really ignore Prairie du Chien either because of how dominant they were. But I guess if you have to make me pick one, I'm going to pick Potosi Cassville just because that win, probably using Steve's definition, as the bigger win, defeating a rival and bringing home a sectional championship plaque to put into the trophy case. Matthew, then Steve, your team or teams of the week.
I feel like once we get to this point in the season, you could really say, like you said, every team has a case to make for being the team of the week. But I'm going to go with Belleville. And the reason I say that is they started the season 0-5. As a football team, if you're down, you don't have that many games to play in a season. Belleville had a massive mountain to climb. And climbing that mountain over the offseason and in August is one thing. But doing so at the end of September and October is one thing. At one point in their season, they were fighting to get a win, then fighting to qualify for the playoffs. Now they win one game and they're going to state and what's probably going to go down as one of the greatest postseason runs in Belleville athletics history. And they've had some good sports teams over the years. So the way that they were able to go in and play that game against Lancaster, a perennial football power and a really good, well-coached team, is very incredible.
Yep, I agree. And we mentioned it last week. Who would have thought that Belleville's the only remaining team in the SWAL that's still alive in the postseason? Again, the more we learn, the less we know about high school football in our area. Steve, your team of the week.
Well, I get two choices because I can go north and south of the state line. North of the state line, Potosi Cassville, largely because, and I'm not disputing about Prairie or Belleville at all, but I think really Potosi Cassville, to get to where they are, they've had the hardest path to get there, unless, of course, you're stuck with playing a number 1 seed in the first round. That could lead to questions about whether that seeding should have been like that, but might be their horse, right? But the Chieftains, keep in mind, they had to beat the number 3 ranked team, and a team from their conference in the first round just to get out of the first round. And then they beat the 9th ranked team on the road in the second round. And then they beat the 10th ranked team for the third time. And off the top of my head, they have now beaten, let me see if I'm right. Have they beaten River Ridge twice by a total of 8 points? Is that number correct?
The 8 or 9, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So given that, I ended up picking Potosi Cassville as my north of the state line team, and obviously my south of the state line team is Galena. because there's a lot of teams that pull off that huge first round upset, and then, well, that's great. See what we did, and then the next week they just fold. Well, Galena certainly did not do that. They ended up they folded off. They followed their biggest win of the season with their best played game of the season. When you can shut out a playoff team by for 3.5 quarters, when your regular guys are in there, and you're able to get 270 something yards rushing against a team that knows that's what you're going to do. Those are both impressive things. So that's my north of the state line, south of the state line pick.
I like it. Yeah. Again, at this point of the season, every team that wins is, essentially the team of the week, because they're playing the toughest game of the season in theory, because, now at this stage, a win and you go to state, and a loss, your season is over. So those are the teams of the week. Let's talk about our players of the week. And again, another one that I've been kind of tossing around, and just by impressive stat line, I'm going to go Blake Thierry again. 23 rushing attempts for 169 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also, again, the 3 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. Also had a sack on the defensive side of things for a well-rounded performance. And, we kind of take those performances from him for granted. But again, when you are kind of pound for pound the best athlete in Southwest Wisconsin, it's hard to, if you find someone better, feel free to share. But those performances really outstanding by Blake Thierry. Matthew, then Steve, again, your player or players of the week.
Well, I'm going to go with kind of an unorthodox way to do this. First of all, I'm going to say Logan Durkee from Belleville. Very solid performance, rushing and receiving 3 touchdowns for him. But I'm also going to go with the Potosi-Cassville offensive and defensive line. And one stat that I would like to bring up is Andrew Nice from River Ridge has averaged on this season over 100 rushing yards a game, and the Potosi-Cassville line held the entire Timberwolf team to just 132 rushing yards in that game, not to mention that Potosi-Cassville was able to rack up around 230 yards of offense, much of that due to the run block and the pass protection from their offensive line. That game was largely played in the trenches. It was a slow game that came down to a couple of plays, and that win there largely in part came from the Potosi linemen.
I like it. Steve, your player or players of the week.
Well, my pick is Miles Schumacher from Galena, who rushed for 178 yards. I misspoke earlier. I shaved off 10 or so yards. My apologies. But he ran for 178, and I believe it was 3 touchdowns. He had a 34-yard touchdown run, and then I mentioned about an 80-yard touchdown run during the second half. And he was impossible to stop for Ottawa Marquette. So that's my pick. They were able to, once they got a score, they kind of really took Ottawa Marquette out of the game, and they were just able to churn the ball basically. And to quote the late great Hank Stram, keep matriculating the ball downfield, boys, and got their best win of the season as far as how they played.
All right, excellent. Those are the players of the week. We would normally do Steve's high five, but there aren't 5 teams left. So but
I would point out that number 1 and number 2 are still in the playoffs.
Yes.
Potosi-Cassville and Prairie Chien.
Yep, exactly. And, and because of that, we won't allow Matthew to say mean things about your list, because, they're
why play the games when Steve already knew who the winners were going to be?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Funny how it all works out, but yeah, you had the number 1 and 2 teams pretty much consistent, and they are on the doorstep of going to state in their respective divisions. Again, coming up on Friday night, 2 games across our Queen Bee Radio family. We'll have Potosi-Cassville against Kenosha St. Joseph in Division 7 on 97.7 Country WGLR and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel, and then Prairie du Chien and Stratford in Division 5 on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. Our Raleigh Chiefs pregame coverage set for 6:30 and kickoff at 7 o'clock for both of those games. And again, a reminder to check out Papa Murphy's Cheesy Stuffed Crust Pizza. It's the hottest, meltiest, best stuffed crust you've ever had. Try a large one-topping pizza for just $13.99 at Papa Murphy's of Platteville and Prairie du Chien. Matthew and Steve have a great call on Friday night in Madison. I'll have the call of the game in Wisconsin Dells for Prairie du Chien and Stratford. And that will wrap up this week's episode of the Papa Murphy's of Platteville and Prairie du Chien High School Football Roundup. For Matthew and Steve, I'm Tyler Diktanas, and we'll see you next week for a state championship edition of the Papa Murphy's of Platteville and Prairie du Chien High School Football Roundup on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel.